I'm going to hit the button. We're live. Hey everyone, I am hoping we're live. That should be coming through. Yes, I believe it is coming through. Good to see. All right. If you are joining us this evening live on YouTube, thank you very much for coming in and spending some time with us. We've got a bunch of interesting talks coming up very, very soon. We're just giving it a couple of minutes to let everyone come through and the stream to buffer. I will be running through our preamble and introducing you to our speakers as soon as possible. Just a bit of a heads up that we will have, I'll skip to this slide straight away. We will have use Slido.com for Q&A, and definitely do take advantage of this. We've got our speakers here tonight, so they can jump in and answer your most your burning questions. So do check that out. There's a quick way to get into it, just slido.com, and you can type in 222, and that should take us directly into the BrisJS meetup December 2021 Slido. Don't know if it has a different name. It's the audience Q&A section. And if there are any, if for some reason you can't access that, and there are some folks leaving commentary in the YouTube chat, I will ferry those questions into Slido to be able to get them there at the same time. You can also upvote other people's questions if you think the same thing and they're similar, and they'll get more attention quickly. All right, we've got a few people jumping in. Got some concurrent viewers now. Okay, well, no problem. We can always watch, folks can always watch back on the time shifted playback as well. But, you know, we do want to make sure that we can get as many live folks asking questions as possible as well. So, yeah, we'll jump straight into it. Go through in here. All right, so thank you very much, everyone, for joining us again. I'm Kevin van der Beeken. If you haven't heard of me before, I try and organize this thing called BrisJS, and we're trying to keep it going through COVID using the magic of the internet. And if you want to be able to reach out, there's some details just there as well. As I mentioned just before, if you missed that little shout out, you can ask questions and interact with our speakers through slido.com. Just check it out on that. There's a QR code, which I'm not sure if it really helps you if you're pointing that at your screen, but otherwise you can also go to slido.com number 222 to be able to get straight into the feedback room. So yeah, we'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the site on which we broadcast from today, which is the Yugara and Bundjalung people. And I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. If you're not aware, you can use Meetup to make sure that we've got an RSVP in there. That'll also give you the YouTube link direct to this, and helps you keep in touch with valuable info for the night. So that will be a good place to be able to get any updates on the exact speaker lineup as well. But we have some other options, as I'll talk to you about soon, about keeping up to date of exactly how we organize BrisJS and see things going on behind the scenes. But this helps us at least give you a way to get emails about the upcoming meetups. There's a code of conduct. If you're not aware, it is available on brisjs.org under conduct. It's meant to be a harassment-free experience for everyone. So we do expect everyone to abide by that, and that includes online. This is, it's a constant. I put it in red and I show it every time we do one of these presentations. We always need presenters. It's a chronically low resource. So we want to make sure that we can get your talk submissions in and we want to make sure that we can prioritize those into particular months whenever you become available. So there's a link on the brisjs.org called Present, which will try and just link you through to our GitHub issues. That's where we try and organize all the different talks and tag them, which I'll go through in a second. And that also helps show them up on the website as well. But through Twitter and other things, I post a link which helps do that pro forma fill out of our GitHub issue information as well. So this is the GitHub issues, a sample of anyway, a snapshot in time. So this is where you can see through tagging, we can see who's coming up, what the length of the talk is. One of the other things you can do from there is also say, you make a talk request. So if there's a particular topic you're perhaps not knowledgeable in, but you do want to see if somebody else in the community is after, you could post it up as a request. And it'll actually appear on brisjs.org as something that, maybe a potential speaker wants to do a talk, but doesn't know what people are interested in, and would be there as a particular topic of interest. And hey, you can pick that up and volunteer yourself. There's a couple of different socials that we're on there, of course. Facebook is not too active, but it is there, and you do have a line to be able to contact me on Messenger if that's your thing. There's obviously YouTube, which we're on here, and we're posting all of the live streams on, as well as Twitter, which is one of the most active areas where we post every now and then in the lead up to each of the events. BrisJS.org I mentioned a couple of times. Just a bit of a tie together site that has a couple of these links that I've mentioned today, as well as the BrisJS job board. So if you do post a GitHub issue and we tag it with jobs, it will be automatically showing on that page there. So it's a good way to be able to say, hey, we've got an open position, come join my team. It's meant to be a sort of a direct job board. So it's not really a recruiter board. It's meant for everyone in the community who just wants another colleague to sit by and or Zoom. So we'd also like to say thank you to our community sponsors. It is part of PCCW Global, which is where I work. There's been providing the Zoom Pro subscription, make sure that this thing has been able to transition to online until we get back in person in our event spaces. One of the other things is we're always on the lookout for more devs. I've been adding folks to my team specifically. There's still a bit of a shout out there going for more senior or mid JavaScript devs. If you're somewhere between backend to front end to full stack, we would like to talk to you for the system architecture and engineering team of the managed services train on PCCW Global. We do a lot of really interesting stuff with connectivity and networks all around the world. So come chat to me if you're ever interested. Tonight, we've got a bunch of great speakers, and we've even got another team talk, which I love to see as well. So first up, we have the carryover champ, Ashley Davis, who's managed to get in a whole bunch of talks, and we always love having him here with these interesting topics. We've got rapid full stack development. So he's going to be taking us through how to do JavaScript and all the things. We're also going to get a great intro into cross-site scripting. So we've got Isaac and Andrew who will take us through that one. And we'll be getting some information around displaying data from DataTablesJS from Jordan Nash. So we'll finish out the night. And do get your Q&A ready because it's going to be a good time. So let me just hit stop share here and introduce you to the venerable Ashley Davis. Please unmute yourself, good sir.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to BrisJS, my friend.
Oh, thanks so much, Kevin. It's awesome to be back and helping to wrap up the year of BrisJS as well.
That's great.
Cool. So I'll get moving. I'll get started.
Absolutely, please do. Take it away.
I'm just going to start my timer just to make sure I don't kind of overlap too much with the other speakers. Don't want to chew into too much of their time.
Awesome. Thank you very much, mate.
Cool. Hey, everyone. My name is Ashley Davis. Welcome to my talk that's called Rapid Full Stack Development. Throughout my career, I've worked with many different languages, frameworks, APIs, and so on, all sorts of interesting stuff. I've our industry changes a lot, and it can seem to change just overnight as well. But one thing that's sort of remained constant for me is my ongoing quest to become a better developer. Always trying to get that little bit better, to move that little bit further forward. I've spent a lot of time, thinking on this topic of rapid development, like how to get stuff done just that little bit quicker. This turned out to be a much bigger topic than I expected. I started kind of writing down some notes for this talk a couple of months back, and there's just a lot there. It was a real struggle actually to kind of strip this talk back, and I'm probably still going to have to skip a couple of slides to come in on 40 minutes. So I'm always looking for ways to kind of refine and improve my development process. And tonight what I want to do is just share some of the things that I've learned that I think are really important and that have helped me. So there'll be a little bit of theoretical stuff and then a little bit of practical stuff as well. And like I said, there's way more than I can possibly fit in this talk. So to that end, I want to announce for the first time tonight that I really want to write a book on this next year. So this is a BrisJS scoop. I'm going to, I put up a landing page. Let me just show you what that looks like. Cool. Can we see that?
Sure can.
So this is rapidfullstackdevelopment.com. It's just a quick thing that I put up, just a bit of an explainer. People can put their email address in here if they want to keep up to date on what I'm doing with this. At the moment, I'm sort of toying with the idea of self-publishing this rather than going through my usual publisher. So we'll see how that works out. On the slide here, you can see that the link to that web page. I'm going to put it online again later. My contact details are here as well. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or just want to chat technical stuff. I love talking to anyone. And these details are on each slide as well, so no need to write it down just yet. I'll just say a little bit about me before I get into the kind of the talk. I've been a software developer for a long time. I'm currently VP of engineering at a new startup called Optio. And we haven't really announced what we're doing yet, but we are building some exciting products that'll be built on the Algorand blockchain. So if that sounds like it's something interesting to you, stay tuned for some announcements coming up next year. I'm the developer of DataForge Notebook, so it's a cross-platform Electron app for like Jupyter Notebook, but for JavaScript and TypeScript. I've written some books, Data Wrangling with JavaScript, Bootstrapping Microservices, and the plan for next year is to write rapid full stack development. Before we start, and just to get you thinking, I want to ask this question: what is the fastest way to write code? Now, I don't really want anyone to give me an answer. In fact, there's no right answer to this question. This is just to get you thinking. And soon we're going to circle back and I'll tell you what my answer is to this question. What's the fastest way to write code? So who's this talk for? Well, it's developers at any level of experience. I hope you can take something away. This is particularly aimed at individual developers. I mean, you might be working on a team, or you might be working by yourself, but it's aimed at the individual members of the team. It's not really aimed at the team as such. Mostly I do JavaScript and TypeScript development these days, so that's naturally why I'm going to be talking about JavaScript, and it is the BrisJS meetup as well. So there's always a good reason to talk about JavaScript on the BrisJS meetup. I'm going to be giving a live demo, just showing you just a couple of coding techniques that I find absolutely indispensable, core part of my process. But this talk, it's not just aimed at JavaScript and TypeScript developers. I think there's a lot of shared wisdom here, really. I've worked on a lot of different languages. A lot of things I've learned have come from different languages or different programming paradigms. So, whatever language you want to work with, hopefully you can learn something from this. So what does it all mean? Well, first, I want to say that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. I've got some good techniques to share. You'll have to take them away with you and try them out for yourself and see how they work for you. Above all, it's an attitude, it's a state of mind. It's a commitment to improving your productivity and effectiveness. And if you can adopt some of these techniques and some of these habits, I guarantee you can become a better developer. You can shift the dial on your career satisfaction as well, which I think is really important. The main theme of this talk is improving the rate at which we produce working and valuable code. And note these two words, working and valuable. That counts for a lot, because it's not just how much code we write or how fast we write it, because our code actually needs to work reliably, and it also needs to be useful. Above all, I just want you to listen and think, and then be able to take something away and hopefully kind of experiment with it in your own process, and maybe even come back and talk to me and tell me how it went for you, and give me your own ideas on some of this stuff. So how exactly do we do this? How do we become rapid developers? Well, first we need to identify the things that slow us down, and then we need to kind of work on reducing those things. And then we can employ attitude, techniques, and tools to enable, empower, and scale us. We want to be able to scale ourselves up so we can produce more, and it can work better and more reliably. We want to deliver a flow of value for our organization. But the key to doing this and surviving it is to being able to do it sustainably. We need a work process that includes downtime so that we can maintain a fast pace indefinitely. A primary concern is to reduce the amount of time that we are wasting. Now, typically for us developers, that's the time that we're spending accidentally doing tasks, which aren't necessarily the most valuable thing we could be doing. So what's JavaScript got to do with it, and how can it help us? Well, here's a picture of what full stack looks like with JavaScript. And if you know anything about JavaScript, or if you've heard me ranting about it before, you know that you can almost do anything with JavaScript. JavaScript is the one language that you can run across your stack, and it means we can freely move around in our stack without incurring a cognitive penalty. That's great news for small teams, startups, and solo developers. But I also think, for any enterprises that are paying attention and they want to compete with startups, JavaScript and possibly TypeScript are just, a go-to bets for, building a stack where your developers can go anywhere and be able to work there with ease. Now, add to this the kind of conventions that we use in JavaScript. They also reduce cognitive load, and they can help us change more projects more easily. I'll give you a demo of some of those conventions, when I do the live demo shortly. So JavaScript is full stack, and that means we can quickly and easily change between any part of our stack, without having to think too hard, without having to load a new language into our brain. JavaScript is also a dynamic language, and this can help us build a fast workflow. Being able to run JavaScript makes live reload possible. I'm going to show you that in action soon. That makes JavaScript great for fast prototyping. It's also great for working with data. JavaScript also makes automated testing a fair bit easier because, for example, it's so much easier to create mock objects in JavaScript than many other languages. But then you can layer TypeScript on top of JavaScript and get the benefits of compile time, error checking, and static typing. So you can kind of choose to trade off some of your short-term coding speed for more safety and less errors in the long run, which can really add up for development speed over the longer term. Now, the really amazing thing is TypeScript is actually really flexible. So it's like you can mix and match the best of the static and dynamic worlds and take a bit of that where you need it and a bit of that where you need it. And you can build a really nice custom process that's really finely tuned to the way that you want to work. JavaScript has a large and rapidly evolving ecosystem. For some newcomers, this is going to be a little bit frightening and a little bit overwhelming. I can understand how you feel with that. But as JavaScript developers, we're spoiled for choice with the amount of tools that we have at our disposal. And the good ones rise to the top pretty quickly. And everyone's got their own camps of what tools they're using, right? But we have some of the best tools of any programming ecosystem. So don't underestimate the power of that. And also, you know, obviously our tools are always improving as well because we have such a huge community engagement. In particular, I want to call out the fabulous testing tools that we've got. Personally, I use Mocha, Jest, and Cypress, depending on what project I'm in and what I'm doing. These tools are lovely to use, and they make testing in JavaScript an absolute joy. And it's just part of the bedrock of my own development process as well. So what can we do to move more quickly as developers? First, let's have a look at the answer to this question. What's the fastest way to write code? Well, I can tell you that it doesn't really have anything to do with how quickly or accurately you can type. So obviously, you know, being a good typist makes a lot of sense as a developer, but that's not really, it's the key to writing stuff quickly. It's not necessarily the key to writing good code quickly though. The truth is that the fastest way to write code is to simply not write it in the first place. I'm going to let that sink in. You may not have heard something like that before. The fastest code that you can write is the code that you preemptively eliminate because you realize you ain't going to need it. And the fact is that so much of the code we write ends up becoming redundant and not being used. The problem is that code is expensive. And if you could predict what code was redundant and what experiments were going to fail, you could just not write that code in the first place and then, you know, save on everything that it's going to cost you. So just keep that in mind. Code has a cost. And the other thing is that code costs not just in development time. Obviously, there's a lot of debugging and maintenance work down the road for any code that's going to be kept and used. So code creates baggage, and we have to bear that baggage going into the future. Another way to look at this is to say, let's choose carefully the code that we decide to write. Be careful where we invest our time. You should be choosing to write the code with the most obvious value, and be wary of writing any code where the value is not yet known. I just asked this question because, you know, I hope it made you think a little bit, and also because it highlights something important about prioritization and finding where you can deliver the most value, finding the best place to invest your time. This is going to make you a better developer. Your most valuable tool is your brain. So please make sure you're using it. As a coder, it's tempting to get into this kind of bad habit of code first, think later. It's very easy to get into that habit. But I challenge you to find ways to break that cycle and put the thinking before the coding. Development is a balancing act. It requires you not just thinking about how to code something, but you also have to understand how that code fits into your team, your company, and your product. And if you aren't already prioritizing your work, you should be. And one of the most important ways you can prioritize it is based on its value to the organization. But this also has to be balanced against the cost of delivering the work as well. Sometimes we don't know how much something's going to cost, you know, until we start building it. So during coding, we still have to be mindful of how long it's going to take to finish something. And if the cost of that thing blows out, we need to constantly reassess, you know, if the cost of delivery is going to outweigh the value to the organization. You can't always answer these questions by yourself, but thinking about this kind of stuff, it should start with you as the individual developer. And then, you know, if and when you need to, you go to your manager or you go to your colleagues for a bit of help to understand the bigger picture. And, you know, if you don't necessarily understand exactly the value that something that you've been asked to work on, you need to understand the value of how that fits into what everyone else is doing. And if you don't, that's when you need to kind of start speaking to people. You probably had this experience. I've had it many times, you know, where you code all day, or, you know, you're coding for some long stretch of time. And when it comes to testing your code, you find that nothing works. And then you spend subsequent hours or days, you know, trying to figure out how you broke it, you know, what's wrong with it, trying to restore your code to a working condition. You know, but that's not the way you should be working at all. Nothing big in software development gets created like in one go like that. The key that unlocks successful software development is iterations. So you take some big task and you break it down into smaller and smaller chunks. Although the big task can be very complex and very difficult to achieve, every chunk of work, every iteration, it should be simple. And if it's not simple, that just means you haven't broken it down enough. Now, I should mention at this point, the iterations I'm talking about here are kind of, personal work iterations, not the kind of larger iterations called sprints that we typically use in an agile team. So, I mean, you'll be doing that as well. You're probably doing sprints or something like that in your team, but you also should have your own personal iterations of work that you're going through, hour by hour, day by day, at a smaller granularity than those bigger team-based iterations. The best workflow, it's a cycle of looking at feedback, reviewing your work, and adjusting your course to always be heading in the best possible direction. Having thinking embedded in your process, that's what enables you to get the right things done. And especially when the clarity, like sometimes it doesn't happen until we're partway through. So we've got to have our mind engaged like throughout this process. So how can we structure our iterations? Well, I like to use a system called the Pomodoro technique. A Pomodoro is a timed interval or iteration of work. Because each iteration is timed, we can use it for time boxing, which is an important technique for productivity. And this process also includes break time. So for every iteration of work, there's a bit of a break time as well. And that's really important because it helps make this process sustainable. And we can't be rapid developers if we're burning out, if we're getting exhausted. It's the process is just not going to work for you. So I like this Pomodoro technique. For one thing, it includes the breaks and just this regular cycle of putting a time limit on something. So you can say, if I don't get this done in that time, I've got to reassess, what is the cost of delivering this feature going to be? And you can keep reassessing that at each iteration. In case you're wondering what a Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato. This is a picture of a Pomodoro kitchen timer. And it's called the Pomodoro technique because its inventor, Francesco Cirillo, hopefully I've got that name right, he used a kitchen timer like this to schedule his work and study intervals. Now you can see the timer goes up to 25 minutes. That's the default time, for an iteration in the Pomodoro technique. That's followed by a 5-minute break. So the total iteration time rounds out nicely at 30 minutes. Now, if you want to structure your iterations using Pomodoros, you don't need a timer like this. Search for Pomodoro. You will find a ton of apps that can do this, or just use the timer that's on your phone. Keep it simple. This diagram shows how Pomodoros are linked together to create a series of iterations. The important thing you get from this process, it's natural gaps in which to insert thinking about what you're doing. So frequent reassessment of the priorities and re-estimation of like how much time is it going to take you to deliver. That having a structure like this, it can help you bake that into your process. And repetition of this process is something you can use to build like a good discipline, a good work habit. And if 25 minutes per Pomodoro seems too short to you, that's perfectly okay to change that. You might want to make that an hour or 2 hours, or experiment and see what sort of cycle works for you. Okay, so this is a fundamental rule of development, and it might seem obvious, but I am kind of breaking this down to some fundamentals. You need to keep your code working, and by this I mean you need to minimize the amount of time you spend with your code in a broken state. This simple cycle, it's at the heart of any coding workflow. I do some coding, I test the code, I check the result, and then repeat. I do some coding, I test the code, I check the result, and so on. We are coding in small increments, testing and assessing the result each time. This coding cycle, it's usually shorter than the Pomodoro cycle. So, You know, I'll be going through this code and test loop multiple times in a single Pomodoro. The amount of time you spend coding, like, it doesn't really matter. It could be a few minutes, you know, it could be 10, 20 minutes. It could be like, the thing to remember is that the shorter you make the increment of coding, the easier it's going to be to test. So the less code you're writing in one go, the easier it is to test that code. It's also really important to tighten your feedback loop. So this distance from kind of test back to seeing the results, the quicker you make that, the faster you can ramp this process up, the faster you can make your development pace. Coding and testing are supposed to be done together in a tight loop like this. And testing, it's just not something that you can leave until later. I like to say, if it's worth coding, it also has to be worth testing. It's only when you unfold this loop of repeated small, well-tested changes that you can really see the power of this process. Imagine this sequence stretched out over some hours or even multiple days. We start with a simple beginning, possibly just a line of code. And then we accumulate a large series of code changes. Each code change is small, simple, and easy to test. So at no point in this cycle was testing difficult or overwhelming. We have baked testing into the heart of our coding cycle. And through a series of simple, small changes, we accumulate a large body of working code. The key point is that we start simple and that each subsequent step is simple. And through these simple steps, we build up to a complex application. It doesn't just get complex, you know, all at once or by accident. You know, we have these repeated small changes. This is the important thing. At the start of a coding increment, our code should be, it should start in a working state. After we add code or we change code, we need to return as quickly as possible to that working state. So the way I see it is the output of a coding increment, it has to be our code base returned to a working state. And anything we can do to minimize the distance between working states, that's gonna really make our development process much more fluid, much more streamlined, and we're gonna build up, you know, complex sets of changes much more quickly. But the important thing is that the code is going to be tested and reliable. I just want to repeat this mantra: keep your code working. If you remember anything from this talk, remember that. You know, that is really at the heart of my coding philosophy. It's the thing I place above everything else. I've been talking a lot about testing, and you might naturally have assumed that I meant automated testing. The thing about automated testing is that it has a cost. Automated testing, it's often a substantial investment. So here's the question to ask: is the code you are writing, you know, is it really worth having the investment of automated testing for that? We need to consider the cost of, not just the cost of the code. We need to consider the value, not just of the code we are writing. We need to weigh that up against the cost of writing the code and the cost of writing the tests. And the fact is that not all code needs to have automated tests. You know, for some code, manual testing is always going to be perfectly okay, and automated testing is just going to be a waste of time. Knowing when to do automated testing and when not to, that's part of the balancing act of being a software developer. And it's not always an easy decision to make. I had a crack at making this flowchart, and I've actually updated it a little bit since then as well. Sorry, I'm not going to give you any detailed time to go through this, but I'm going to put this flowchart online later. I'll put an updated version on. This chart can help you decide whether or not you should do automated testing in any given scenario. There are many projects where automated testing is going to pay for itself, because it can remove countless repeated hours of manual testing from your development process. But I don't think it matters if you test first or test later. What matters is that you test your code. And if you put automated testing in, then that's, you know, you're always going to be able to run that at zero cost in the future to retest your code. What automated testing is it captures your feedback loop and preserves it so you can rerun it as many times as you like. It also provides fast feedback. We need to write fast tests, of course, to make that work, but that gives us the closest possible thing that we can get to instant feedback. So this is what can make automated testing really powerful. I mean, you might change a line of code and have no idea what the ramifications of that are across your code base. But with like a large library of automated tests, you can find out almost instantly whether you've broken something that you otherwise you would have had no idea that you broke that thing. Test-driven development, or TDD, what I call test-first development, that isn't the only approach to automated testing. Now, I learned TDD and I did practice it to a great effect for many years, and I still use it sometimes. But I also realized that TDD, it's not really necessary, although sometimes it's very useful. And I do recommend people learn TDD because it is a great starting point. It will make you a better developer. And it's simply a well-documented way of learning automated testing. So in a moment, I'm going to try and give you an idea of what it's like to write a test without using TDD. I did want to talk about refactoring, but I am starting to run short on time now. So I guess what I just want to say about this is that refactoring that isn't supported by automated testing is very dangerous. But refactoring is also very necessary. Like, it's a very necessary part of your job to, as much as you can, maintain a clean and well-organized code base. Something that you can easily make changes to in the future, that has like an understandable structure. Refactoring is what allows that to emerge naturally, but you can only really do it if you've got automated testing in place. Otherwise, you're going to break lots of things, or you're just going to have to do a lot of manual testing. Developers spend a lot of time debugging. I've got a lot I could say about this. I've actually got a blog post as well that I could show you on this, with lots of techniques for stopping bugs going to production. But one thing I just wanted to kind of show in my live demo is how, and JavaScript makes this really convenient. It's so easy to kind of take snippets of code from your big code base that has lots of baggage and take them out to like a tiny test bed that has no baggage. And it makes it so much easier to kind of experiment with code, understand what's going on with it, fix problems. I'm going to give you a demo of that in just a moment. I'm running short on time now, so I'm just going to skip this. I did want to talk a little bit about how version control kind of helps, but I do have a live demo to do, so let's get on with that. So this is the, where is it? This is the blog post. If you go to my blog, codecapers.com.au, you can find this blog post, keeping mistakes away from production. There's a whole bunch of individual and team-based techniques you can practice here to stop bugs going to production. The demos I'm going to be doing are going to be using some code that I've written earlier. So DataForge, which is my data analysis library for JavaScript and TypeScript. And my TypeScript template as an example of having a little testbed program that you can easily kind of put code in and play with it, experiment with it, fix problems. And I've got a front-end version of that here as well. Both of these are on my GitHub, Ashley Davis, so you can have a look there if you want to find those. And DataForge is on the DataForge organization website. So I've got a bunch of projects open here already. And the first thing I do when I'm coming back to a particular project, so this is a TypeScript library, and it can be used in the front end or the back end or anywhere. So it's a good demo of what you can do with JavaScript and use it in any kind of circumstance, really. When I'm coming back to a project, I always run the tests first. So npm test is a little convention we have in Node.js or JavaScript that no matter what framework you're using, that is what runs the tests. So in this case, I'm having it run Mocha. I also have my own alias on that just to make things a little bit quicker for myself as well. R for run and T for test. So when I'm doing frequent testing, I often use that. Now you can see the tests come back really quite quickly here. There's 765 tests here. So it's you know, it's a decent sized code library. There's a fair bit of code there. There's a lot of tests there. But the important thing is that when I change some code, I can run these tests and they come back with the results very quickly. And this is running on my laptop, which is kind of slow. Like if you see this running on my desktop computer, it's a lot more, shall we say, instant, very much closer to instant than that was. But that's still pretty fast. I mean, that's still very workable for me working on a laptop. I often work on my laptop and you know, but I have put a lot of effort into making these tests run fast. Obviously, you can completely stuff up your tests and have it run really slowly. I've already got this open in VS Code, I think. So one thing I like to do to demonstrate is I want to demonstrate live reload. That's really, you know, at the core of my fast development process. So I run that using npm run test watch. So that's my personal convention that, you know, other people use that as well. It's not just mine, but it's not really a standard Node.js convention. Or I run my alias RTW. So that runs all my tests in live reload mode. So now I can make changes to the code. I've got the code for this library here on the left. If I accidentally kind of stick a bug in there and save it, you can see the tests automatically rerun and I get a test failure. So, you know, instantly, in this case, it's pretty obvious that was going to fail. You know, I just made that, you know, I just made up a breaking change. But often you can easily break your code, as you probably well know, and you know, break it in all sorts of ways you don't even realize until like you get it into the hands of your customer, right? So I'll put that back the way it is. We should get nice clean tests. So I don't know if I've really got enough time to kind of show you how all this works, how all this fits together, but just really wanted to give it a little bit of a demo, some of the way that I work. Now, if I wanted to, let's say that the function I want to test is the standard deviation function here. It also relies on the variance function. Let's just pretend I just coded this, right? And the fact is, like, I first started this library many years ago when I was sort of at the peak of my TDD experience. So a lot of this library was coded using test-driven development. But these days, you know, I rarely bother with that because, you know, TDD is great for building discipline. Once you have that discipline, you can code however you want. And then it actually turns out to be much easier to kind of test afterward. But you have to have built that, discipline for yourself as well. Now, I've already got a test here for the standard deviation function. Actually, this one here is the one that I want to write. Let's just pretend that I'd never written that, and I wanted to write that now. How would I go about that? Given that I've already written standard deviation code. Here's a quick way to write a test after the fact when you haven't done test-driven development. So obviously you need some input, and I've got this input. Originally, I got this input just from a textbook, so I could actually kind of verify that I was doing a standard deviation in, you know, correctly as far as the statistics are concerned. I'm going to put that in a data series. I'm going to call the standard deviation function on that, get the result. And then I'm going to expect the result to be something. I don't know what yet. The fact is I could just get the number from that textbook, but let's pretend we don't have that available. But let's also pretend that I've coded this function very carefully and I've manually tested it, so I know that it works. So I've been through the process of manually testing it, maybe in a test bed or something like that. And I'm just going to say, you know, to be equal to 0. And I run that. Obviously, it's going to fail because it's not going to be that. But look, it gives us the answer. This is the crazy thing that, you know, if you know that the code works, you can just go and write a test and plug in the answers, right? So now I've got a passing test for that code. I can go and mercilessly refactor that code, and all I have to do is just make sure all my tests, you know, across everything are still passing. So that's just it. That might seem like cheating, but you know, I think, you know, at the end of the day, if you've got the automated tests, does it matter how you got there? Does it matter if you did test first or test last? If you got the test, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to show you my little testbed project now. So this is my TypeScript template. I have this open in Visual Studio Code already as well. Now, what I like to do is whatever project I'm working on, whatever language, whatever framework it happens to be, I like to have these test beds ready to go. So, you know, I can just run this and it's going to produce a result or not. Oh no, sorry, I need to run, you need to compile it first to be able to run it that way. So if I run it like that, it's going to run it under TS node, so I don't have to compile the TypeScript code. Anyway, so this is running now. This test bed is running in live reload mode, and I can take TypeScript code from anywhere and I can plug it in here and play with it. And as a demo, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to take some code. So let's pretend in this standardized function here. Let's pretend that there's something wrong with this code and I can't figure out what it is. There's just too much baggage in this product. You know, there's too much there that's weighing me down. I'm going to just copy that out. I'm going to go back to my other project and I'm just going to copy it in there. Now, obviously, you know, I save that. I've got it running on live reload, so it's just going to reload. It's got a bunch of errors because, you know, obviously most of the time you can't just copy code into some other project and get away with it. Like you have to do, you know, like a little bit of work here to to get this running again. And, you know, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. It depends on what you want to do. You know, maybe, you know, there's some input, some particular input that kind of breaks this code. Maybe you want to type that in. You want to hard code that in. And, you know, I'm going to print that out. And so hopefully this will get some sort of result. You can see, so you can see here it's printed out these values. So now I've got, you know, some code replicated from this big heavyweight project into this tiny, you know, 100-line project. There's like probably not even 100 lines of code in this project. Like it's just a test bed, it's a template. So that is on GitHub under my Ashley Davis, under my GitHub account. Look for TypeScript template. I've got a whole bunch of other little templates here for kind of things I've needed in the past. I've got a front-end template as well for just doing a bit of front-end TypeScript React coding, if you need a place to kind of do that. The other thing I wanted to show you was Ionic. So Ionic is a fantastic mobile framework. So it allows you to build mobile applications using web technologies. So for a start, you know, you're using your JavaScript knowledge, your HTML front-end knowledge to build a mobile application. But the amazing thing about it is it just runs in the browser for testing purposes. So I've got it running here already. To run this, I just ran the conventional npm start Node.js. And if I can just find the window, this is what it looks like. So it's not too exciting. It's just one of like the CLI generated kind of starter applications that you get with Ionic. You know, some of them have tabs, some of them have this like side menu. There's a couple of different options you can choose from to start. It looks a little bit boring as it is, but you know, you can style this with CSS to look however you want, and you can make some really beautiful looking applications. Now, this is it literally just running as a web page. So you can actually just build this as a static web page, you know, put it on some server somewhere and you've got a web page built using Ionic. Now, it's not really meant for that. You kind of got to go into your dev tools here, and then you can kind of, you know, switch between form factors to change what sort of mobile device you're looking at. Now, the really cool thing, as usual, is that it comes with live reload. So sometimes if you're using something like Webpack or, you know, one of the other kind of ones, you know, you have to do a bit of work to configure hot reload. With Ionic, it just comes built in. So I should be able to just kind of put like a hello world in here. And I'm just going to save that. And then on the right, it just comes up, you know, almost instantly. So you can be hacking away, coding, adding features to your mobile app, and all the while you're just watching it kind of update. And you don't get a faster testing cycle than that. Now, of course, you are using this to build a mobile application, of course. So, you know, you can actually use their tools and, you know, whatever the native kind of SDK or IDE is. So, you know, depending on whether you're building for Android or iOS. And you can build the native version of the app, and then you can test it on your device. So when I'm doing mobile development, I have this cycle that's kind of like, you know, when everything's going well, you're testing like every 10 minutes, you're testing in the browser like this. once every few days, you're testing on device. If you're trying to solve particular problems on the native device, or do work that's specific to that, then you test on device a lot more frequently. But a lot of the time, you're just like any web developer, you're sitting in the browser, watching it refresh, coding away, watch it refresh, and it's a great testing process. All right, I'm actually a little bit over time now, so I probably should get ready to hand it back. But I just wanted to leave you with this. I want you to make a commitment to spending 10 minutes each day thinking and improving yourself. Set aside the time. Ask yourself, what can I do to improve today? Or how can I do a better job than I did yesterday? You start to build a habit like that, and in no time at all, it adds up, and you become a better developer. I've got so much more to say on this, and that's why I want to write this book next year. So if you love some of the ideas that I presented here, please go and have a look at the webpage, and let me know that you're interested. Thanks so much for listening. As usual, it's been a pleasure talking.
Thank you so much. I appreciate having you here, and I'm sure everyone else does too. That's fantastic. Thank you very much again. We do have a couple of questions that managed to pop in there. I think there's a bit of a challenge on some folks are watching this on the time delay as well. So did encourage everyone, just get them in there. Just make sure that we can jump in. Sorry, I've got a couple of questions that I need to ferry over to Slido. I'll read out the first one. So one of the ones that we've got in here is to know what functionality is of value so we don't waste time coding, as you put it.
Yep.
How can we get the feedback prior to code, short of mock-ups that do user testing?
I think it's really a lot of what we do is based on perceptions. Like, I mean, you could be the kind of coder who works all week and shows nothing, and then you come up at the end of the week and what you show is completely the wrong thing. Don't be that kind of coder. Yeah. Like, engage with people, kind of talk to people every day. Show them what you're doing. Find excuses to brag about what you're doing. I mean, don't brag about what you're doing, but you get excited about it and show people what you're doing, and have an opinion as well. Like, have an opinion on whether you're doing the right or the wrong thing. And obviously, sometimes that can lead you to kind of metaphorically butt heads with people. We don't really want a lot of arguments, but I think it is important to kind of be in tune as well with everyone around you and the company and what the customers want. And that can be hard to come by in like a big company. And that's one reason I love working for small companies and startups as well, is you've got that real direct connectivity with, the people who are going to use your product. So I have worked for some massive companies, and I know that it can be a challenge to kind of, connect with the right people to kind of have the right understanding about what you're doing and why you're doing it. But talking, communication is and showing people what you're doing is the main answer there.
Absolutely, that's it's core to everything we do. What is your stance on code coverage metric tooling in that code testing cycle? So
I pretty much never use it anymore. I'm not interested in having 100% code coverage. I'm interested in having the important parts of the code covered. So it's like, you as a developer, you can get in tune with that every day you're working. You kind of know what parts of the code are breaking the most, causing the most problem. What parts of the code are going out most frequently. What parts of the code are you having the most trouble with? And they're the ones that you should be taking, if they're not tested, taking a little bit of time, make it part of your job, make it part of that cycle of work to test that code that you're working on, and cover some of those gaps. But I used to care a bit more about code coverage, but now I think in this game it's so counterproductive to try and get to perfection. It's so really wrong. And no one, I mean, 100% code coverage is like one metric, but everyone's idea of perfection is different anyway. So does it meet the needs of the business and the customer? And are you managing to stay on top of your sanity as a developer? They're some of the most important criteria. So if you're under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure because code's always breaking, you've got to find a way to get some support or break out of that cycle and get some testing on those areas that really need it.
Mm-hmm. And pair programming is another thing as well.
Yeah, and it's not something, pair programming is not something that I've done a lot of. I mean, especially the last couple of years since COVID and working from home. So it's not really, it's not really something that I do at all at the moment, but it has been like a really great experience to kind of, be able to have someone there by your side, especially to solve some of the most difficult problems. So, I've never done that full-time pair programming thing though. I'm not sure. I think doing pair programming 100% is the most effective use of everyone's time, but it's definitely like I feel like I really miss that now, actually. Having as much as I love working from home, this is my office, by the way, this is where I work. As much as I love working from home and having to communicate with the team online is all great, but I do miss being in an office and being able to grab the person next to you to kind of look at a problem or help you solve something that's really difficult.
Absolutely. One of the other questions that's in here is, if you can't fix your code to keep having a working state, do you reset in version control and that's
like the most important thing.
Functionality?
That's the most important thing from the slide that I skipped. Is that doing small commits? So doing small changes is great because small changes are easy to test. So it's easy for you to build up a reliable working body of code. But then on top of that, doing small commits to version control is really what captures that tested working code. And having the commits be small means that you can always be in a situation where you can do a git reset on your working copy. And I do that whenever I need to. I always get into lots of crazy situations where I'm like, oh, that wasn't a good idea, or I've broken that so badly, and fixing it is going to take days. Like I shouldn't have started that refactor. I thought it was going to be easier, but it wasn't. Git reset hard is like my best friend. It's like my get out of jail free card, right? Like.
Yeah. Do you ever find that you need to just sort of reset it and move on to other functionality rather than try and hammer into the same problem, or is it more?
That's it. Sometimes you've got a problem you're bashing your head against, and you just need to take a break from it. And sometimes, when you come back to it, the answer can be obvious. Other times, it's like, that's when you got to talk to people. It's like, this thing that I thought was going to be easy, turns out it's not so easy. That's pretty common. And
that's right.
And like I've been working on it. I thought it was going to take me a day, but now I've been working on it for a day, and I think it's going to take me 3 days. Like, is it still viable? Is it still worth that investment of time? And it can be really hard to kind of take something that you've put a bit of time into and then just abandon it. But sometimes that's the best approach to take. Or maybe, stash your changes so you can come, if it's something you really want to finish, come back to it when you've got a bit of time later. Or create a separate copy of the code, whatever, but abandoning in progress code changes can sometimes be like the best decision you make in a week, because otherwise you'll just lose too much time, following up on that thing that in light of how complicated it turns out to be, maybe it's not as valuable as you thought it was.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole for sure. Eric Morano was just asking, did you manually calculate the answer when you wrote that function? I'm assuming that's the standard deviation.
Yeah, right. No, because I got my statistics textbook, and I've sort of been going through a process lately of just making sure all those functions kind of work mathematically how they should, to the best that you can when you're working with floating point numbers in JavaScript anyway. But I knew what that answer was because I knew I was going to demo that, but typically I'm not some kind of savant or something like that.
Well, I like that your original test had close to as the number, right? Like it was two decimal precision.
I always feel really uncomfortable putting like really high precision numbers in, and it sort of comes from my days as a game developer, when it was like you're working with these 3D worlds that are very imprecise, and to stop people clipping through walls and stuff like that, you've got to be like, if they're within some tiny value of this surface, then they don't go through it. So
absolutely,
I feel very uncomfortable working with high precision floating point numbers because the nature is that they are imprecise.
Yep, that's it. And we've seen in the history of computers all these actual CPUs are will have particular numbers where they just do not match up. There's actual floating point math problems as well. So all sorts of craziness in computers.
There's a great blog post on that from years ago. It's something like, Google it. It's like what every computer scientist should know about floating point numbers. And it's like from 15 years ago or something, but it's still like absolutely relevant in all of today's languages. I recommend everyone read that blog post.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much again. It's been enlightening and enriching, and we all need to go and take a second with ourselves and understand what can we do better. Have that retrospective, that reflective practice. I think there's plenty to be gained there. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Awesome. What a great way to kick everything off today. So we've got a team talk now that we're going to be introducing. So we've got Isaac and Andrew who are going to be giving us an intro into cross-site scripting, which is an extremely important topic. We all know that we need our web security to be top of mind all the time. So can I ask that they unmute and share their screens now?
Hi all. Wheatley's going first, and then I'll follow.
Hi, welcome. Thank you. Thanks. Welcome to BrisJS, and
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Take it away at your own pace.
Alrighty. Sharing my screen. Just making sure that comes up. Just 2 seconds. Make sure I'm sharing sound. Cool. All right. So we can all see that.
Yeah, it's a bit blocky. That's come through now. Excellent.
Excellent. All right. Cool. All right. So thanks for having us, and welcome to cross-site scripting, an introduction. So tonight we're going to sort of split this up. We're going to do a little bit of theory, a quick lesson, quick basic overview of what cross-site scripting is, because as developers, as you sort of said, we need to be at the forefront. It always needs to be sort of, whenever we're accepting this untrusted data, we need to start thinking about cross-site scripting, thinking about how we're going to actually trust this data. So today, just making sure I went there, I'll be doing that intro, and then I'll be handing it over to Isaac, and he's going to do a practical example. And the way he's going to be doing this is using the B framework and a damn vulnerable web application. It's sort of like a web app that's set up to be broken. So this topic is actually, it's funny because I've been a developer for most of my career. I sort of have slipped into security in the later parts, but the reason why I got into security was because of cross-site scripting. In a project I was doing when it was like this volunteer portal, I was very proud of it. It had you basically log in, you could change all your updates, like your contact details. So if an emergency happened, they could be contacted and pulled into and deployed where they needed to go. And part of the deployment strategy where I was that the actual team that handled most of the deployment was the security team. So as part of that, I kind of had to, I gave all the information I needed to, so they could pop a hole in the firewall, people could hit it and all that kind of stuff. And I was just sitting in the afternoon, and I got a message on my link, and they said, "Oh, Wheatley, I think I might have found something that your code probably didn't want to do." And I walked down to the SOC. I sat down next to the security consultant, and they sort of showed me what they did, and it was a slight escaped alert 1 on one of my forms. And I don't know, as you can imagine, we've all been developers. I felt a bit downhearted. All this effort that I went into was pretty much broken in under a day. But they sort of gave me this book, this OS Top 10 mantra, and I sort of just always refer to it, always live by it when I'm coding. Of course, it's progressed through the eras, but essentially that's what started me into security, and it's what's basically paved the rest of my professional career. So what I was thinking about when we started here, I'll just reiterate the exact OWASP cross-site scripting definition, and then I'll try and sort of, decouple it a little bit and make it a little bit more palatable. So OWASP says that cross-site scripting is attacks that are a type of injection in which malicious scripts are injected into otherwise benign and trusted websites. So essentially what's happening is that you've made this website, it's living in this trusted domain. You have, created these inputs for people to use. And what you generally want it to happen is someone puts in the input that you want it to happen. It gets processed in some way, either on the server or inside the client, and then it pops out. With cross-site scripting, it's someone who's not your nice user, your typical user. They want to come and break it. So what they do is they put malicious code such as JavaScript execution in it. And that basically opens your site to vulnerabilities. So you can start executing code on the server side. You can start doing a whole bunch of stuff with this cross-site scripting. So where did it all begin? Cross-site scripting, I think in 1999, a bunch of Microsoft people sort of coined the term. And then in 2003, it was introduced into the OWASP top 10. And it's still there today, except it's sort of gone through an evolution, because as we've got these new technologies, it's sort of, our categories have to be a little bit more broader, but cover off it. So as you can see in that bottom image down there, cross-site scripting sort of gone into our injection sort of area. So that's because, we need to start broadening our topics in security, just because of the broad scope that's happened over the generations. So types, there's a whole range of types, but tonight Isaac and I thought would just focus on sort of the main three. So there's reflected, stored, and DOM. And to sort of explain these, I'll try and step through some simple examples. So the first one is reflected. So to show this, I'm gonna just use this basic simple web application. So you've got the simple app. It's got a simple input of name. The person submits it, and it goes to a server. Something happens to it, and in this regard, it's got hello input appended to it, and then it's pumped out to our user. So, this would work in all the niceties, except when someone wants to come and ruin the party. So someone's come along, and this example demonstrates reflected. So reflected is when something is processed. So it comes in, it gets processed, and it gets spat back out. So in this example, instead of being nice and saying, hey, I'm Gary, this person's come and put in a script. It's gone in, the server's gone and processed it. And now what's happened is it's come back as HTML and popped up the hello, the alert. So the reason why this happens is because of this trusted domain that we've sort of built up around our browsers that isn't so trusted. The browser's dumb. It just likes to execute things that are given to it. So if it doesn't know that someone's gone and put malicious code in there, and nor should it, and it's just executing what it was asked to execute. And that's sort of like what makes cross-site scripting so dangerous. It can be that easy, and it can be that notorious. The second example that I want to sort of demonstrate is stored. So similar to reflected, we have that basic example. We're putting the script in, but this time it's going through the server, and then during that process that's happening, it's going and being saved into the database in some way. So let's imagine that you're on YouTube and there's a comment system, and you're able to inject some type of code into that particular comment system. It'll come around and execute on anyone that goes to that particular video. So that stored site scripting is actually quite, the vector, it's a wide audience that it can actually attack. The last example that we have is DOM. Now, DOM is similar to, it looks similar to reflected, but basically what's happening is that we're not going out to the server. There's something that's within this particular web application that allows us to manipulate it and execute code that when the user is presented with it, the malicious code gets executed. So you can sort of imagine what you could do with this kind of stuff. So you don't just like, alert is a great way to find it, but you could pretty much inject a lot of type like JavaScript in there. You could be executing code. You could be scraping the DOM. You could be grabbing things that they didn't expect you to be able to grab and shooting it off to some other site or somewhere else that you weren't expecting that to happen. So now that I've like gone through the different types, I wanted to sort of touch on our frameworks, because if you remember when I first sort of had my introduction to cross-site scripting, the reason why it happened is because I was using this new technology, which was ASP.NET Classic. And it was handling a lot of the things that I thought it was handling. Like I was trying to sanitize. I was using stuff that helped me sanitize it, and just I thought it was working. But there was actually vulnerabilities within the framework, and that was a good learning curve. And so I wanted to put this slide on there. It's like frameworks. Like, should I still be concerned? And the answer is yes. I think the latest React one was in 2018, and dependencies galore. If you're putting dependencies into your applications, they're going to be vulnerable in some way. So yes, be concerned. Always make sure that you're doing trying to sanitize your inputs and validating, encoding, decoding the HTML inputs, all that kind of stuff, all that kind of niceties that help you build up confidence in your code that you're writing. And I think that's something that I kind of wanted to also touch on. We're never going to write perfect code. You will always write code that's going to be vulnerable, and never be discouraged that what you're writing is going to be vulnerable. Just always be aware that it can happen. Always engage with the security team if they're available, or talk to people. Try and find someone that is, because no one's perfect. And I hope that my example showed that I don't think I'm perfect in this area, and it's a great learning curve. And once you start doing it, it's kind of, I like building things, and all my mates that I have in security like tearing things down. So it's a wonderful relationship that I have with some of my friends. So now that I've talked about the bad, what can we do to prevent the bad? So the OS WASP has they've got a nice cheat sheet on there, and it's good to have as a guideline. Like it's not gonna cover up everything that you have and what's out there, but basically what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to go through that mental process. So if I'm ever writing code and I'm accepting external data, I don't trust that data anymore, and I sort of have built up the knowledge to sort of go through these things to try and prevent as much as I can these malicious activities that can occur. So I picked out the top three because I think they're the good ones. So yeah, never insert untrusted data. HTML and code. So that means like, yeah, encode your HTML, know what's coming in. And attributes. So that those DOM attacks usually are, you know, attribute related. So not only are you worried about your inputs to that, worry about how the attributes of those of those HTML encoded HTML can actually be attacked. So I'm hoping this is going to work. So I hope the sound comes through. But there's a YouTube video clip about this that a lot of people use when they're trying to show what cross-site scripting sort of happens. And I kind of wanted to show something that happened, you know, not too long ago. And it's just going to be a short 30-second clip. And basically what happened was this Twitch channel, he's obviously got some type of bot client looking after his channel, and someone decided to post something, and some of the things that you're about to see can happen. So this is still around. It is going to happen. It's always going to happen when we're allowing this sort of input of code to come in, untrusted code.
I don't even know how to do anything, but that was pre-made. Okay. Well, this was pre-made, yeah. Okay. Alrighty then, that was entertaining. So, let me put it this way. You guys found a vulnerability in the chat client that... Don't mind me. Oh my goodness! I'm just gonna sit back and sip my tea and somebody get Time Shifter in here. He's got to see this.
So
I don't even know
sorry
how
about
to
that.
do anything.
So I hope that sort of showed that, you know, it's in everywhere. It's everywhere. And if you want to try and look into this a bit further, there's heaps of resources out there. Google has some challenges that you can do to step you through all them. And when we get to share our slides and all that kind of fun stuff, we'll include a list of the challenges that you can sort of do. So now that we sort of built some knowledge on cross-site scripting, let's see some in action. So Isaac, if you're there, mate, show yourself.
I am here.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going? Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, good. All right, shall I take over?
You can take over, mate. It's all good.
All right. Oh, I cannot share while other participants are sharing.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
Okay, cool.
You're welcome.
Cool. Thank you. That was very good. All right, this is the screen I want. Cool. You should see, yep, this one. I can't see what you're seeing, but I'm assuming you're seeing what I'm seeing. All right, so what I want to walk through, and Wheatley went over the outline of XSS, which is great. Or maybe I'll intro myself. Okay, my name is Isaac. I've worked as a dev and a tester at some security companies over the past couple of years. Currently, I'm studying a new role, and I'm also working with Wheatley on Beef, which is the browser exploitation framework. We do that kind of in our free time. And going on from Wheatley's talk of XSS, I want to do a quick demo of it being used. And this is not a typical case. Maybe this is something that might happen or could happen. And there are some steps to get here that I'm not going to cover. I'm just going to cover, assuming XSS has been exploited and is, in control by someone else. So I'm going to use two tools. First one is the Damn Vulnerable Web Application, or DVWA. You can download it here in various forms. I'm going to use a Docker image, which is actually from Docker Hub. Part of the reason is, and I recommend people don't just download the zip and install it on their machine. I think they should run it either in a VM or Dockerized like this so that you can easily delete it and not have it running. And don't ever install this on any web-facing thing or any servers. Just stay away from that. It is exploitable by design. I'm also going to be using Beef, which is the browser exploitation framework. to do the hook once we have XSS. And this is a project that has been in dev for like 10 years. And Wheatley and I have been working on it for the past few months. It's a security testing tool focused mainly on incident like IR, red teaming, phishing, that kind of thing, but has a range of modules in it. Let's see. So let's go launch the damn vulnerable web app here. This is a Docker image. It's going to run. It should get where is it? Oh, here it is. We get an IP address, so we'll go visit that. And we're going to run this thing in this browser, in Brave. And the reason I'm doing that is to separate the two. I want to show you what it's like to have two separate machines. I'm going to use two separate browsers. And I'm sure you can guess what the password is. It's admin password. It's damn vulnerable. You start it up, and the first thing you want to do is check this out. I mean, set that up, which will kick us out, and we log back in again. That just sets up all the pages. Okay. Then we have a bunch of vulnerable apps we can run, and one of them will be XSS. And immediately we see user input, as we described. This is the part that's vulnerable to XSS. And just to prove it is vulnerable, let's chuck in the classic XSS test. There you go, pops up the modal. So normally it's supposed to be your name in there, right? But it's vulnerable. Okay, so with that there, let's go over to Beef. And let's assume that go. Let's run that. And this will come up with a few URLs. One of them is going to be the user interface. The other one's going to be the hook, which will be the JavaScript that we're going to attempt to inject into the XSS vulnerable part. So we'll go to the user interface. Okay. Here's a UI. We have an old browser I was testing with. Ditch that one. We want to get the new one. We also want to get the hook, which is here. And this is JavaScript that is, that Beef uses to communicate back and forth. So we've got Beef running. We're going to go back to the other browser, this hook one. We want to put in the code that includes the JavaScript hook. And so that's going to look like the same way we did before with the script alert. Instead, we'll be swapping out instead of writing the JavaScript in there, we're going to be just putting in the source. So we've sourced that hook.js from the URL that Beef gave us there. And then if we run it, doesn't appear like anything happens, but we go back over to Beef, and you can now see the browsers appeared. So this is simulating XSS has happened to allow a JavaScript hook to occur. You can now click on that, and we can go to commands, and we can see a list of commands we can try. Not all of them will work in every browser, but let's go down and look at this one. So let's just get the page HTML. Assuming that a user has been hooked, and the person who is hooked and wants to see what page they're on, you can get the return of the HTML. You can see what they would be seeing. So this is the HTML of this page. And let's see, just for giggles, let's go here, which is the same alert script kind of that we tested with, but it appears in the target user's browser. So yeah, that's kind of a practical example of what might happen if XSS could be used to its fullest extent. There's other things that can be done with it, and this is just reflective. Obviously, if the user refreshes this page, because it's reflective, this is gone. If they navigated away, this wouldn't persist. So it's, the middle ground of having to get this to happen is another thing altogether, which I'm not covering. Anyway, like I said before, Wheatley and I work on this. If you're interested in it, let us know. We'd love to have you work on it with us. But we'd also be happy to talk about other things in future. If you guys are keen, just let us know. And yeah, that's my quick little demo.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, folks, for taking us through that.
You're welcome. Let's throw some questions there.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that came in, and I think a couple got answered. So that's pretty good. I think the first one was interesting. Is there automated security testing?
There is, and it kind of depends on what you're testing. So with things like if you're doing like JavaScript, there are tools, I don't know off the top of my head what they are, but there are companies that are focused on trying to automate this process. Some have been successful. But yeah, there's ones out there. If you just search like automated testing for JavaScript, there'll be like tools you can use. Some of them are very expensive, like $10,000 every time you run it, kind of expensive. But some of them are ones you could just plug into VS Code and things like that.
Yeah, and as you kind of expect, testing code, it's sort of like a two-pronged. You can do your automated testing, which is good, but no one knows those business flows like your client, and you sort of like knowing those business flows helps the pen testers sort of go through and break those things as well. So it's sort of like all these different angles that we like to take. One of the things I love to do is static code analysis is something that we can probably mention as well around this question. That it's always good just to have a look. Thank you. Cool. I accidentally left that kind of open. So they're good. Yeah. There are some that are based off OS top 10 as well, especially in the .NET area. That you can have it like, your little squiggly line. It'll come up if you start writing something that's actually vulnerable as well. So there are some cool tools out there.
Yes. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, kind of in the unit testing questions, and I think that we've been fielding tonight already. So I think that's probably where it was coming from. So that's great to point out as well. We've been employing quite a number of those across our CI/CD builds all the time as well. It's always fun to see what kinds of things you can pop out with those security analysis, static analysis tools. Yeah, one of the other ones here was we recently learned that many Docker-based images are vulnerable too. I guess we have to start trying to build those ourselves too.
Yeah, and I would be very careful. So that's why I mentioned Docker Hub. Only download things that you know what they are, because someone could give you any Docker image that has anything in it. And so, yes, build it yourself if you don't want to trust anyone. But also, I mean, you're downloading a vulnerable web app. Like it is vulnerable. Yeah. So yeah, be careful.
And I was just writing like a little Python thing the other day, and I was using Slim, like the Docker image. And over the last week, I think, I got an alert saying, hey, this particular image has got vulnerabilities, so it's like, oh, hop in, stop using it. So that kind of stuff, it happens all the time. So yeah.
Got to keep a guard on there. Find the hardened images on Google Cloud and things like that as well. Cool. You've answered this one. Are you interested in finding code contributors to Beef?
Yes, we are. Please. Yeah, just you can find us on GitHub. If you go to the Beef GitHub, you can make an issue and contact us that way, or I can put an email in chat or something, and you can find us that way too.
Absolutely. Sounds like a plan. Somebody was asking, I think, during that injection demo, does that client watching injection require a stored exploit? And I guess you answered that. You said it was happening there and then. If you refresh the page, it was gone. But I guess you could certainly keep monitoring and monitor many people. If that was a stored exploit, then it was popping up in every user session.
Yeah. So that would be a really bad scenario if it was stored and you had that entire hook in there. But for this demo, it's just reflective. So perfect. Yes, you want stored. And I say you'd want stored as in a malicious person would want stored. I don't want stored, but yeah. So the demo is just reflective right now.
That's awesome. No, that's really good.
Cool.
Well, thanks for that. I'm just going to check the YouTube studio to make sure that I haven't missed any questions there. Okay, cool, great, good. You're off the hook, folks. Really appreciated that.
No, yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, it's definite pleasure. And I was going to say that like the security world is something we need to be exposed to more and more and more and more. We need people showing us how crucial this is that we think about it. And there's a lot resting on developers' shoulders in the JS world, since we can do full stack. We can introduce full stack vulnerabilities as well. So we've got to make sure that we do these things right. So it's super important. Awesome, folks. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Cool.
And,
thank you.
All good. And I will now have the pleasure of being able to introduce you to Jordan Nash. Come on in. The door is wide open. Oh, there's a screen share. Well, we now need to be able to see you.
Good to see you too. Just wait a sec, because I'm new to all this. Start my video. Gotcha, and you should be able to see me. Great. So
everything's in order.
Sorry.
I said everything's in order. Take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So my name's Jordan Nash, and I'm a self-taught developer. I actually work in customer service, but there is a lot I've learned over the years doing my own projects. And there's a project that I want to present to you called DataTables editor. And I'm just going to start my Pomodoro timer. It was a good habit Ashley had before, and I'm just going to have it going down now. So, yep, I'm going to show you how to retrieve data from related tables using Data Table Editor with ASP.NET MVC. I didn't put MVC there, but it should be okay. So I want to give a big shout out to Jay Gordon, Hayden Khaleesi, and Herman Staniski. All those people really helped me. Jade helped rehearse with me, not once, but twice. Hayden gave me a lot of good ideas. I wrote some on his post-it notes here I've got, and Herman helped mentor me, and from all the way from Ireland, and really gave me feedback on how I could improve my code, and I've put it all into a demo from my main project. So without further ado, I'm going to show you. So are you tired of writing code to sort, search, and paginate data? So regardless of the framework, I've seen examples online of people using really outdated examples of how to do this. So there is more code on both the client and server. There's less functionality, less interactivity, less buttons to click that will do certain things with the grid view. And so here's an example from Microsoft and C# and Entity Framework. Mind you, I know this is a JavaScript meetup, but I'm using a JavaScript library for this. So this is the C# code here on the back end. All you need to know here is that there's some code that will allow us to sort by descending and ascending, and it has it in the switch cases by default. For example, when we sort by last name in the data table, it will do it by ascending, and it will translate it into a list when we pass it to the view page. So if you know about the modal view control pattern, design pattern, all you need to know is that the view page is basically a HTML page at runtime. That's all it is. But I'm just going to go further. And here's what it looks like in the front end. So this is all built by Microsoft. This is their code. This is not mine. I'm not going to sort of, how do I put this? I'm not trying to rat on Microsoft and say that they make terrible code or something, but they tried to show sorting, paging, and searching themselves using their code in the document. And it's a lot of hard coding that you see happening here, and it will work when compiled. So this is just in the header. And if I go further to the next page, as you can see, you might recognize some of the parameters. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to go further. Yeah, so here's all the dirty breadcrumbs under the body. So this was all the view page I was showing before. So I've got here the buttons, the next button and the previous button that will show in the view, and I'll show it to you in a second, an image of it so you can understand. So here, as you can see, -1. So we can go back one record through the database, and we can go +1 through the database, to the next record. And this is what it looks like at runtime. So when we compile it, this is what it looks like when compiled in the browser. So as you can see here, the code to do, there wasn't any code for the searching. I forgot to put that in there, I apologize, but As you can see, I've got the next button and the previous button, and you can tell we're in the first record and it's all grayed out. And if you go to the next button, obviously it will go to the next few entries. And when you think about it, there's more that can be added. And if you're watching this on YouTube at a later time, try and pause this video. Give yourself a moment to think about what features could be added. Try and write something down. I'll just give you guys 10 seconds to think about it before I say anything. Okay, so what could the features be? They could be, excuse me, you could tell us the number of records in the table. There could be some text down here that will tell us the total. It could tell us how many records to display at once. And it could show us how many pages exist. So, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like you see in Google and everything, and all the other applications out there. And this is what it will look like in data tables. So this is what it looks like here. So that's using that. You can go to DataTablesJS and you will see that page right there on their website. And I wrote a blog there that appeared on the front page a while back. And yeah, already 3 missing features are present. We can click on different page numbers. You can see the page numbers there, and we can see the total entries we have gone through in a table. So as you can see, we're on the first page. So it says that in both places there, and it shows that we're displaying 10 records out of 57 all up. So as you can see, 10 records right here, 10, 25, 50, 100. So if we clicked like 100 here, as you may have guessed, it would display all 57 entries. Okay, and that means yeah, it would display the whole thing. And it's open source, so if you wanted to go the extra mile and wanted to display even more, which I don't know if it's a good idea or not, you could put in you could customize the code to show like 150 entries all at once. I don't know how good that would be for the end user though. But yeah, besides that, I'm going to give you a working demo of how to do this with SQL Server, Microsoft's ASP.NET Core, and yeah, Entity Framework Core. Well, really, we'll bypass Entity Framework because the backend libraries don't support it. But I think they do if you purchase the client-side ones, but we're just using the open source stuff. So the prerequisites to doing the following along with me, and you don't have to do this now, but the prerequisites to doing this are to install .NET 6 SDK and install Visual Studio 2022, because by default, Visual Studio 2019 doesn't support .NET 6, and it's kind of annoying because I like Visual Studio Code better, to be honest, but I found the scaffolding engine just didn't work well. You don't have to understand too much what that is. That basically just generates the controllers and views. And so data tables allows us to do everything I showed in the previous page. And the backend addition of it, data tables editor, allows us to render data from many backend databases to the front end. So it handles it all in the backend. Data tables editor and data tables are 2 separate things. One is for the front end, one is for the back. And data tables editor allows us to render data from joint tables, which data tables does not support, which can really be helpful to do. And I'm going to show you how this is all done right now. So I'm going to fire up Visual Studio. Actually, it's already fired up. And I'm going to go and install some of the data table libraries right now so that we can get this done. So I'm going to just copy and paste it from my other sheet. And we're going to go to the package manager console. You can also use the developer PowerShell, but that disappeared on me and I don't know how to get that back up right now. Also, I haven't spent as long in Visual Studio as I have in Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to paste it in and I'm going to install this package and it'll appear in my project file. And as you can see, it's installed. It's there now, if it wasn't already. And yeah, so what we're going to do is we have several options. We could host, we could use the content delivery network that Data Tables provides to host the front-end libraries now that we've installed the backend libraries. Oh, by the way, I just want to say, in order to handle the backend libraries, you need this code here. We're in the startup, sorry, in the program file. Just keep in mind that in .NET 6, they've done away with the startup file. It's now the program file. So it's all centralized. All the core application logic is centralized in this one program.cs file, which is a bit of a relief to me because it just makes things easier. And there you go. This is the line that we use to use the factories to link data tables editor with the front end. So we're also going to we've also generated the database using the scaffolding engine, and we've generated all the views. And this is our connection string. We're using the local DB to do that. I didn't use SQL Server Management Studio, if you know what that is. Anyway, so now we've taken care, I think, of the backend libraries. We're now going to install the front-end library, data tables. So the simplest way for me to do that, and I recommend people maybe do a local download first and not really use the content delivery network if you're like just trying to demo it. So because you might want to present it and have it run offline to your team. And yeah. So I'm right here. I'm just going to type in. So I'm going to just put in data tables at 1.10.21. And here are all the files to do with the front-end libraries, the JavaScript files, the images, the CSS, and I'm going to install that. And that's put it in here. It's referenced it in the libman file. You don't need to know too much about that. And there's the www root, and there's the lib. It's a sort of, it's called libman. It's a sort of inbuilt Visual Studio app that does library acquisition from third-party websites. So it will just get them from the website and allow us to install them without having to download them from the website externally, which can be cool. So we don't have to leave the IDE here. So there's data tables, the front-end libraries, and as you can see, all the files are there, so it's installed. That's great. But I also want to say that we've also made a shared instance of it. So right here, we've got, excuse me, in our layouts, we've got our data tables statements where we're declaring the CSS and the JavaScript files that I've just downloaded. So we're using the Bootstrap framework there, and I'm putting it there as well. It doesn't really matter too much. I guess you could just put it in the include section. But this is also the important thing. Here's the JavaScript files here, Bootstrap, and the data tables. This isn't really as necessary. It's really, if you want core functionality, you want that. And yeah, the JavaScript file up there, it doesn't, I mean, the CSS file up there, it doesn't even have to be the Bootstrap by default. It can be, I think, something else. I forget what they say in the documentation, but you can use Bootstrap, and that looks better. And I personally love Bootstrap. I'm sure everyone does. Let me see, what else have I covered? So right now I'm not using data tables at runtime. So if you watch and if I render it, I'm using .NET Core with the view pages. So I'm just going to show this quickly. And excuse me, it's just taking a bit of a while to reload. My computer's a little old. I'm going to eventually buy a new one. And oh yeah, there you go. There's the page, and there's recipe ingredients. And this doesn't make sense, but we're basically displaying the primary key, the foreign keys of each column. If you know your database logic, for example, here we're basically here we're displaying two of the foreign keys from the different tables. So if you know anything about data tables, you know that tables can be joined together, can be related to each other, and we can have TBL. So one ingredient can be found on many recipes, and one recipe can have many different ingredients. You may already know this. And that would result in an error message and duplication of data. So we have the TBL recipe ingredient table there to prevent the duplication and any errors from occurring. And as you can see, we're sort of linking the primary key into this foreign key here, and so on with the ingredients. And at runtime, we could say, for example, we could display, instead of recipe ID, could display the title and just have the recipe ID running in the backend, just telling the table, hey, we want to display this at runtime. And yeah, we could do the same thing with in the ingredient. We could have the ingredient name showing at runtime, if that makes sense, instead of the ingredient ID. So it'll show, like, you know, kimchi noodles, and then sorry, probably say, you know, like kimchi, and then for the ingredient, and then, you know, for the recipe, kimchi noodles. So that being said, we're going to customize all this, and we're going to definitely put in the names of these values here, not the IDs. And the real big thing here is we can't do any sorting. So if we click the headers, you know, it won't sort. There's no searching. There's no pagination. Let's fix that right now. So as you've already noticed, we've downloaded the DataTables libraries, and we've downloaded DataTables editor. So we've downloaded libraries for the front end and the back end. So let me see. So what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly look at the view page. And this sort of should look a bit familiar from the PowerPoint slide I showed. And you don't need to know too much about .NET. I know a lot of you are coming from a JavaScript background. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the controller page that was generated quickly. And as you can see here, here's the controller page. And there's the index. And that's what we're using at runtime. And oh yeah, I should show that this is what the models look like. Really, I could show the ingredient and recipe model, but I'm just showing you the recipe ingredient. There's the recipe ingredient model. I don't think you need to see the recipe and ingredients. Besides, I've got a blog about all this if you're interested later. So you can see like pretty much everything I didn't cover in this video. So yeah, we've got the quantity, and we've got sort of, we've linked the recipe and ingredients to this recipe ingredient table. I showed you what that looked like in the diagram already. I hope that made a lot of sense. But I could just show you the recipe class there. There it is. And there's the ingredient class. It's if I'm going too fast, it's something you can just look at in my blog later. So it's nothing to really worry about at this stage. And it's not what this video is about, what this presentation is about. So we're going to now use data tables. So now that we've referenced the front-end libraries in our shed file before, as I showed, we're now going to customize the logic here. So what we're going to do is we're going to mess around. Oh yeah. Before we use data tables, we also have to, we'll get an error here, I think, because we're not, yeah. If I just run this again, I think if I build this, no, we haven't got an error yet, but what we have to do is we have to make sure we declare that we're using the front-end library for data tables. So right here, if we go to, excuse me, I'm going to just minimize some of this. I'm going to go to data. Oh, there you go, global namespaces. I love what .NET have done here. You know, they used to have all these using statements for every single file, but now you can just put them all into the one file and then just write the global keyword, and they will just be used globally throughout your application. So you don't have to declare them in every single code file, which is just great. And I'm going to declare that we're using the data tables library. So you know, you might even would use that. Sometimes you can guess it correctly. It uses advanced, I don't know, AI or something in the back end sometimes to complete stuff for us, but it didn't guess it right. Didn't know exactly what we wanted. We want this, and we're not declaring it anywhere, but we'll do that now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our recipe ingredients controller that we've generated with the scaffolding engine. And I'm just, I could show you just how I did that. Like you go to new scaffolding engine, and you go here, and then, you know, for example, you pick this, the recipe ingredients model, and it would then ask, what do you want to use to generate the controllers and the views, you would use that. And there's the cooking context, the database context class. You can look at that in my blog a little later. I'll just show it quickly. There's that. Oh, and here we've got the DB initialize class. All that's doing is populating sample data. There's probably a better way of doing that using third-party locking frameworks and APIs, but I'm just using this database initializer to display the data for in the backend. But you don't need to worry about that too much now. So we're going to focus on the recipe ingredients controller because that is at the core of what we're trying to do with data tables. Yeah, so it's a sort of jQuery / JavaScript library, really powerful. And I'm just going to put in the whole method here. So we're going to just put this in. That's our left join recipes and ingredients onto recipe ingredients method. Sorry if that doesn't look as neat as I would like. Remember, I am sort of new to this. And yeah, I just wanted to be descriptive. And obviously, maybe it could be done better. But I tried to make it as descriptive as possible, but probably sacrificed a bit of readability there. But all you need to know is that this is to left join. And we will get at the connection string in a second. Really, just so I don't annoy you guys with that red squiggly, I'm just going to comment that out and we'll deal with that in a second. Actually, maybe you can just deal with it for now, and I'll just, what I'll do is I'll use the connection string now. So I'm going to declare it from my application. We already have the cooking context there, so we'll just delete that. We've got the eye configuration, the eye configuration sort of interface that allows us to display to connect our connection string globally throughout our application. So it'll be able to access, the program file that we have down there, where we're also referencing our connection string, and then appear in the JSON file where it is here in the JSON app.settings. So I'm just going to quickly just pass it to our constructor, so it can pass the connection string at runtime back to the database. And yeah, okay, we've done that. So now that squiggly line is gone, so we're going to go back to this. So basically, we've got the table here. So that we're connecting it, and we're using the SQL Server database, and we're telling it which table to use, which is TBL recipe ingredient. And right here, we are saying exactly what data we want. I just want to be clear here. This is the editor library, the data tables editor library. This is not .NET. This is data tables editor. So it supports many different backend libraries, many different backend languages, Node.js, I think, PHP, and of course .NET, as you can see here. And yeah, this is the data right here that we're getting, that we want to display. There's no linking here. We just want to display it. That's what we're trying to tell our method here. And we want to see the quantity, the title, and the ingredient name. And to do that, we are doing the left joins here to link those three tables into one, into our recipe ingredient table. So right here, we're using the recipe ID, as I've told you, from the TBL recipe table, and displaying it in TBL recipe ingredients. If you don't know what TBL means, it means table. That's just a prefix. And we're doing the same thing with the ingredient. We're linking the ID from the ingredient table to the TBL recipe ingredient and transforming it into a foreign key. And then we're sending it back to the client using JSON. So now we're going to go to the view page. I'm going to be quickly here because we're getting out of time. You'll hear some beeping soon. That's just my Pomodoro timer going off. So we're going to go down and we're going to rewrite the index page here in data tables. So all of this in the body, we're going to scrap pretty much all of this. And we're going to put in some JavaScript, which is what we're really here for, I think. Yeah, so now we've gotten rid of that. We're also going to get rid of the, excuse me, we're going to change the model for, we're going to just get rid of the IEnumerable sort of instance here. And we're just going to reference the model directly. I just want to be clear, in the backend, we're not using Java. Sorry, we're not actually using the model here. We're going into the database directly. The server-side table, the server-side libraries from DataTables editor, it sort of breaks dependency with entity framework and the model view controller pattern and all that stuff. It breaks that. But it's open source, and that's sort of the price you pay for using the open source version. The client-side version, I think if you pay for it, you can still use entity framework in the backend or whatever object relational mapping tool you're using, and Hibernate or DARPA or whatever the others are. So I'm going to go back to my front end, excuse me. So yeah, now on my front end, we're now going to use the JavaScript, the data tables instance. So just here under the table, we have to leave the body empty in order to do this. And excuse me. So if I just put in well, yeah, autocomplete that, and then really, okay, great. So now it's done that, and we're now going to put in a bit more. I've got 18 seconds left on my Pomodoro timer, so I'm going to take it away as fast as I can. Let me see. So this code right here, this line right here, it'll stop us at runtime from, how should I put this? It'll stop us from throwing this to the console. I mean, it'll stop us from throwing this to a message box. So basically, by default, any code will be thrown to a message. Okay, cool. Yeah, it can just, yeah, it stops us stops the code from just appearing in the front. So the table, for example, our backend table, it won't tell us where the error is exactly. Which can be embarrassing if you work for a company. It can look sort of embarrassing for them. And also it can tell an attacker, you know, what your tables are, and then they can potentially, it makes it easier for them to do, I think, SQL injection attacks in the backend. And we want to prevent that. So we can put it to the console with that line of code. It's very handy. Really powerful data tables. Just the front end is great. And we're going to now go and we're going to start declaring the table. So, okay, so right here, we're going to just call it recipe table. Call it what we want. And we're referencing the method from our backend. You probably already recognized that enormous method. And yeah, that's from the controller that we had before. And let me see what else. So now we're going to start rendering the columns. So we're going to get the columns from the database that we want to retrieve. And here they are, the very columns. And I know we're hard coding this here. There's probably a better way of doing it, but I haven't discovered the best way of doing that yet. Keep in mind, it's because we're using the server-side libraries. It's not supported as much, so we have to do a bit of hard coding, but it's still worth the price, trust me, when you look at the end result. So I think here we're just going to put some more space. So right here, yep, we're leaving some white space right there. And yeah, what else are we doing? Let me see. So right here are the 3 buttons. So right here we have where we're rendering there's something else I should explain before we go any further here. So I'm just going to explain something right here. This is very important. Basically, by default, data tables has this thing called row underscore, and then it's got the ID value, you know, maybe it's 1, 2, or 3 or whatever. So yeah, and this will replace that. This is really important. That will replace row, and it will just emit that at runtime, and it will allow us to just print the ID sort of in the console or what have you. And we can use that to link to the other buttons. So if you remember our details and edit and delete buttons before, this is what we will be using. We'll be using the render DT row ID that we declared up there in the function right there. And we'll use that to link the ID of the record we're on, so that when we press either the details or edit or delete button, it'll take us to everything to do with that record using the render DT underscore row ID function that we've made up there. So it's very important that you declare that, else you'll get errors because it won't know what ID you're talking about. Row underscore 5, for example, it won't know what to do with that. And anyway, we're complete with that, I believe. And now we're going to render the program and hope for the best that it works. Okay. And it's just going. Just wait for it, and hopefully it will work okay. Oh, sorry. What did I do there? I've got the. Excuse me. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste everything here, and maybe that will fix it. Because sometimes when I copy and paste a bit, it can get screwed up a bit. Excuse me. And I'm just going to try that again. I know I should probably read the error, but when I've done the copying, it's solved the problem before. And hang on, if I go to recipe ingredients. Okay, that didn't work the way I intended it. Invalid operation, a model item passed the view data is of type system.generics. I've had this before. Let me try and resolve this as best I can. Oh yeah, I know what's happening now. I'll be really quick. So what we've done here in the index is we have to dumb this down a bit. I don't really like to use that word, but we're going to get rid of the asynchronous logic. So right here in the index, we're going to get rid of that. And we're just going to return just the index and get rid of all this logic that was generated by Entity Framework. And once we get rid of that, that will sort out itself, I think. Oh, sorry, I have to stop it and then reload it. And it should work on our first go, I think. There you go, the red squiggly is gone. And if I just do a quick build before I run anything, that should be gone. And now if I do a run, if I run the code, if I go to the table, it'll show it all. So there you go. There's all the pagination we're doing on the paginating with the data, the searching. So for example, I'm just going to put in K for Korean noodles. And there you go. Kimchi noodles. You know, lemon, garlic. If you want some lemon, search for lemon. And it will just display that. And you know, if we want the quantity, we can just get that. And what have you. And really, we could go forward for other pages, but we've only got 3 entries that we've put in here, but it could do that. And yeah, you could go to the details page. And I haven't really put anything to do with the data here, but that's something that could be added later. The main point is what we're doing in this table. And, you know, we can do all the sorting and everything, which is really great. It's data tables really does a lot for you at the end of the day. And you can add the bootstrap as well. I might see if I can even do that. Hang on a sec. Let me go back to, excuse me, the index. Oh yeah, I'm already doing that. I'm using the bootstrap right here that I've used to make it more responsive, and I've put in some borders. And yeah, that's how you do the all that responsive rendering with data tables. And other than that, I'll just say quickly, before I let you guys go, there is something else here. I should just tell you. So if I just go forward to, so right here, you could be that guy right there at the screen, and you might be really excited about this technology right now. And it is amazing data tables and allows us to do a lot. And it can use the entity, it can use sort of Entity Framework core if you use the client-side libraries. And if you want to purchase that, and if you want to convince your team, you can use my project to do that. And I'll just say just quickly before I wrap this up, is right here. we've got the my blog where I actually read all this from, because I made a whole blog about it, and it's quite a few pages. I put it up on Jekyll consolecommando.net. You can just go to blogs and you should be able to find it. This is the title of it. I can put it in a comment if people are interested. And yeah, there it all is. And there's all the images and everything and all the instructions about how to create it from scratch. Anyway, I give it back to you, Kevin. Thank you.
No problem at all. That's fantastic. Thank you for showing us through all of that. I'm sure that'll be of great help for folks going to try and rapidly prototyping that data table driven view, and go through and follow your examples as well offline. And you've definitely given folks a head start by being able to watch the stream. But thank you. That was really well done.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of questions here as well. One of them was mentioned in here, would it support a go to last page? Typically to go to last page, typically to, I think it's just a typo. That sometimes gets left out as ordered records aren't available. So I guess getting the reverse of the window of the data set is potentially something that might not be available. Not sure if you know.
I don't know too much about go to. Is it a front-end language or a backend? I've heard of it, but I don't know if it's front or back.
No, sorry, it's the pagination options I think it's referring to. So if an option to be able to go to the very last page. So for example, if you've got hundreds of pages, you might want to start from the back of the record set. I think the poster here is trying to say, not all of the data tables plugins supported that, as in gets left out. Yeah,
look, maybe they haven't added that, but there's lots of blogs done about data tables. I mean, for example, oh great, I'm still screen sharing. So for example, it's open source. So, there's a lot of blogs. There's mine right there. It's an old one. And then there's all these others. Mm-hmm. So it's possible someone's already built that in somewhere with GoTo.
Absolutely.
And it's gone to the last page. So maybe it's already there.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Could be. Yeah, absolutely. Have a look around. One of the other questions was, are the front-end interactions vanilla JS so that they can be incorporated into the other front-end libs or frameworks?
So it's good you asked that, because it is a sort of JavaScript / jQuery library, as they say on the website. So it does use JavaScript, and I don't know if it's entirely vanilla here, but
yeah, the jQuery kind of gives that one away, hey. But that's pretty common still. So if people are still using jQuery for some stuff in there, they can plug that in pretty straight away.
Absolutely. Keep in mind, as I've said, I use the editor one because it supports the linking of foreign keys. So if I just use data tables for the databases, it wouldn't work when it comes to foreign key columns. It wouldn't matter if it's just one table, but if it's adjoined tables, that's where editor comes in if you're into the full stack.
That makes sense. Cool. Does data tables have any dependencies, or is it self-contained is the last question?
Yeah, there needs to be more clarity on that. I don't know what they mean by self-contained, if they mean in Docker or something. Really, when you say self-contained, it can be done offline. So you can have the choice of using a content delivery network. But if you're sort of really ultra concerned about security and you want it all offline, or if you're working for a really paranoid customer, or you just want it running offline, just demo to your team, you can just locally download it like I've just done. So yeah, it is sort of self-contained in that aspect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no worries. Absolutely. Maybe library dependencies or anything like that. We've already seen jQuery as a listed dependency, so I don't know if the ASP.NET side has an equivalent library dependencies that kind of take place, but probably, because it's quite frameworky, right? It's part of the nature of the way that works. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Sounds good. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much again.
Thanks,
Round
Kevin.
of applause.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And I will just try and grab the screen share back, and I will throw up a last slide there. Thanks again. And one sec, we'll do our little outro. And one screen share for me. It is taking its time. Apologies.
That was great. Whew. Whew.
Yeah, it's good, man. Absolutely. We'll track back to you in a second, and I will just make sure that I can check participants and mute, and good stuff. All right, should have everyone back, and we should have my last outro slide, just so you can grab some details, and you can also, again, review the Slido if you wanted to leave any feedback. I've left an open text poll there started, and that way, if you've got any feedback or suggestions for our streaming events, you can leave that there. Yeah, that's actually everything tonight, folks. Really appreciate all your love and attention, and all the comments you've been able to provide to our speakers today. It's been wonderful to have you all year, and I wish you a safe and happy end of Christmas and New Year, and a wonderful start to 2022. As we head into another JavaScript season starting February, we give everyone a holiday break. So if you've got any burning ideas over the Christmas break, or you've got any talks you'd like to see queued up for February, I'm absolutely happy to help work with you on that, and make sure that we can have those talks ready and fresh into the new year. So yeah, thanks again, everyone, and yeah, we'll catch you next time at Brisbane JavaScript, and hopefully all again safe and well. Catch you all later. Thank you.